Hi, and welcome to a new episode of the Luxembourg PE&VC Stories. Today's guest will be Bogdan Gogulan. He is the CEO and Managing Partner at NewSpace Capital. Welcome, Bogdan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
A real pleasure to have you here. So, what can you tell us about NewSpace Capital? Who, when, and how did that whole adventure start?
Well, NewSpace Capital is a private equity firm focused on growth investments in space and space-related industries. And we invest in companies that solve some fundamental challenges for the growth of that industry. And that started now already over 5 years ago. I'm here in Luxembourg, and it started with 3 co-founder members. So myself, Slava Turushev, who is coming from the Jet Propulsion Lab, and Felix von Schubert, who comes from the private equity industry. So I'm bringing in defense and business development experience to the firm. And so since then we grew to 8 people and still here at the heart of Luxembourg.
Excellent to hear that you are Luxembourg-based. And could you now, because you described a little bit your verticals, go with you more details concerning those investments you are executing, and also how do you source such deals?
Sure. So what's very interesting about space is that space addresses pretty much every crisis that we have right now. So economic crisis and specifically productivity and efficiency crisis we have in the economy. It addresses climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, food crisis, social and economic development crisis. And so it's really great to invest in the area that has such a great impact. Now, in terms of the overall industry, we focus on the supply chain and the application side of the space business, so on the ground side of it. That helps our investors to tap into the growth of the industry without taking on the inherent in-space risk of operations. So we focus on the supply chain that makes space infrastructure possible and applications that makes that space infrastructure useful. In sourcing the deals, we have the outbound approach. So we firstly identify the part of the market that has big potential for growth. Then we look at the value chain of it to identify which part of the value chain is going to get the most economic benefit. And then we determine the specific players that solve fundamental challenges. So one example of that would be very often when people are thinking about the space, Starlink or Kuiper or OneWeb, something that comes to people's mind. So they're thinking about the low Earth constellations that are providing bandwidth for internet. But what it means is that enormous amount of information going back and forth between the space and the ground. That requires enormous amount of radio frequencies that are just not available. And that's a fundamental challenge. The amount of the information going from space to the ground increased 16 times in the last 3 years. And so we need to go from radio frequencies to the laser. That's a fundamental challenge. And so one of our investments is actually solving this problem by providing the laser backbone communication for these larger constellations.
So we could say that you're really in the end far away from sci-fi and more down to earth if we compare a little bit with those investments.
Absolutely. And so I think another proposition for about space is that it's all about asteroid mining and going to Mars. And it's definitely exciting activities, but sometimes it might sidetrack people from what's actually happening in the industry. And 99% of the industry is focused on the ground, low Earth orbit or Earth orbits. So it's what we call Frontier 1. And it's that industry is serving the traditional industries on the ground. I think that's a very important point to think that the customers of that industry are the same type of companies that everyone knows. So it is food companies, it is transportation companies, communication companies, finance companies, insurance companies. So it's all pretty much down to earth.
No, that's great, because you can have now some real customers directly instead of then creating that demand for those services.
100%. For example, the first investment that we've done, ISI, which now is pretty much a household name. It wasn't at the time when we invested in the company, but they now have over 190 customers across various industries. So this is a very good indication.
Super. Any other deal you would like to highlight next to the one you just shared with us?
Well, probably another very interesting deal would be a French company called Kairos. And that deal is interesting for a number of reasons. One, that's actually the company that purely operates on the ground, doesn't have any assets in space, so just uses space data for analytical purposes. That's one. Two is that because that company addresses the climate crisis, and the way it addresses it, that it really helps financial institutions around the ESG reporting on their portfolios. So around the SFDR framework, which is of course a big topic right now. So that company, for example, helps companies to quantify and validate the information that have previously been self-reported by the companies. They provide third-party source data which is quantifiable, measurable, and auditable to really help people to understand what's the impact of the investment portfolios and the specific companies in the portfolio.
Another very concrete business model. So, Bogdan, also you mentioned Luxembourg before. What could you tell us about your operating model a little bit? Where are you represented?
So Luxembourg is one of the centers for the commercial space globally. And of course, it's one of the financial centers. So the combination of the two makes it obvious why we are based in Luxembourg. Luxembourg has fantastic talent specifically around the space investments because of the pedigree of the companies that have been here historically, such as SES, but then also the plethora of NewSpace companies that have evolved over the last 5 to 10 years. And so 8 of us, out of 8 of us, 5 are based in Luxembourg. We have purely onshore Luxembourg-based structure all the way through and sort of operating with local service providers. And operating in Luxembourg gives comfort to our LPs that we operate in a framework that is politically stable, that is legally transparent, with established, well-known service providers. And this is really important when you are starting to invest in a new area. So that gives the sort of the emerging manager the necessary framework so that the LPs don't have to overcome sort of the operational challenges, but can really focus on your investment thesis.
And we all remember that Luxembourg had pushed strongly in the direction of, let's say, having a diversified economy and also integrating the space economy in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And Luxembourg government has done really good job in being focused, being persistent, and being consistent at driving that message. And it's really sort of amalgamated over the years, and it's fantastic to see that it continues to be the focus.
Good. And in this context, what has happened within your firm over the last years?
Well, first of all, we've done the first closing. We've done few investments. So there's another investment that should be announced next week. We've grown the team, as I mentioned, to 8 people. And we've seen fantastic performance with the portfolio. So companies grew their revenue over 10 times. And so one of the first companies that we invested in, now a unicorn. So it's really great to see the development of the space economy, the development of the financial ecosystem around it. And it's also very interesting to see that now, the more we talk to the LPs, the more we see that people understand that NewSpace, what NewSpace is investing in is not esoteric, but is, as you mentioned, down to earth. And that becomes a topic, that becomes a theme. So people see that as a potential for diversification of their portfolio, as well as a very interesting risk-return profile industry.
Perfect. Sounds very promising. Again, ESG. Do you have a policy, a strategy? Is it a priority for you?
ESG, well, I think it's a priority for everyone. So one way or another. We don't have plan B as far as the planet is concerned. So absolutely. So space itself, by nature, the majority of the investment in space is dual use. So therefore, if you invest in the space industry, you can't be a SFDR 8 to 9, right? So we are SFDR 6. However, what we really focus on is to make sure that the companies we invest in, 1, create real ESG impact, and 2, that we can substantiate that with the relevant reporting. So our aim is to do everything as if we are SFDR 8 without really carrying the SFDR 8 hat.
The Luxembourg ecosystem, we mentioned it before, and we're very happy to have you here. Any recommendations or observations concerning how we have fared so far and what potentially we could do in the future?
That's a tough question, but let me start with all the things that I think are working really well. So One is, as I mentioned, political stability, the legal framework, the wide choice of service providers, deep pool of talent, and also something that no one else really has, and this is location. So Luxembourg is really at the heart of Europe. So all of those factors are really important. In addition to it, of course, Luxembourg really positioned itself in the space ecosystem. And I think in terms of the things can be done better, look, there is always questions around the marketing and distribution, which is really important for the private equity firm. And so there's sort of some I think more competitive practices that can be put in place that would locate not just Luxembourg but also Europe at large in a more competitive state. That's one. Two is of course SFDR reporting and ESG reporting. I think it's really important to go away from sort of high-level qualitative measures to more substantiated measures, to really differentiate people that are talking and people that are doing. And then another point I think what's really important is just to continue investing in talent.
Okay, point taken. And we also on our side prefer the doers than the talkers. So that's also a very good element. Anything else you would recommend in the future, for example, on that talent question? Because, I mean, specifically your sector seems to be specialized. And is there anything here, for example, we could also look at?
There is fantastic interdisciplinary master program in Luxembourg, specifically around space, and that's been put in place a few years back, and which produces good talent. I think what would be good to see is also sort of intersection of the space from the commercial perspective, engineering, and then financial perspective. And so that's something that is a very rare combination of skills, which is really important specifically for the investments, and considering that space is underinvested, especially the growth stage of space industry is significantly underinvested because of the lack of the investment talent. We really need more people that specialize in that to make an impact and help industry to grow. And that's something that we are looking for the partners, and also would be very happy to sort of contribute what we can in terms of our knowledge, time, and resources to help to build that up.
That completely fits the picture, because also our sector, PE&VC, there it's the complementary of, let's say, different profiles, having then the best of finance, but also operations, and certainly also engineering when you're doing such technical things, that with that combination, you are one of the best in the field, and therefore you need to kind of develop that further. Okay, that's super. How did you land now in this sector, Bogdan, and what did you study?
So I'm a financial economist by trade. And I spent first half of my career in finance and second half of my career in defense. And so defense was sort of a natural introduction to the space. I was doing what's called the ISI, Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance, which heavily relies on the Earth observation and satellite communication. And so that was the introduction to space. But then surprise to me was that actually defense and security applications is a very small part of space, that the space overall is majority commercial. And that's what kind of got me excited about the industry. Industry has been around for 65 years, $450 billion industry, has stability, predictability of a large, old industry, but has the emerging industry growth rates. So that risk-return profile was really exciting, and that's when I started looking at the potential of investment in that area.
So let's help then fuel that further growth. And what would be then your piece of advice you would give to young talents who would like to enter your specific field now?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's very important just follow your passion. And whenever you look at successful people and at their journey, like really not just successful people, but inspiring people and people that are happy in their life, not just in their job. And you look at their road, it has never been a straight line. But I think what's typical is that they have been following their dream. And there is just, look, the old mantra is that don't change the goals, just change the ways how you, if something doesn't work out, just change how you're going to get there.
You just mentioned inspiration, so from either leaders or persons you have worked with or who helped you to kind of become who you are. Anybody you could mention here?
Certainly, and one of the most inspiring people that I've ever met was my martial arts coach when I was still a kid. When I started that, he's still my coach to this day, so we go sensei. And what I really what I really learned from him is that he was reinventing himself every time. So every 3-5 years, he was really reinventing himself, and that's why now at the age of nearly 60, he's still trying new things, rediscovering himself, and never let his success be a limit to his future success.
Okay, so probably many experience in different fields, which then brought him forward. Very nice. And on the music, podcast series or books, anything here you would like to recommend? That can be in your specific field or let's say or completely in another one.
I have to admit, I have never been interested in space technology per se. So what attracted me to space was the impact that it has on the ground. And as a result, I haven't seen, Star Trek, Star Wars, or other related movies. So now I'm doing a bit of a catching up. So, and the latest movie actually that I watched was Interstellar, and I had to watch it, of course, because Slava Turyshev, so one of our co-founders, was a scientific advisor to that movie. And so that was a kind of a good start. And by the way, it was a fantastic experience.
Okay, I could only recommend that one too. Super. Have you heard of Battlestar Galactica, the new version? That was also kind of interesting.
I still have to get to it, yeah. But it seems that the next one is going to be Dune, and then probably going to get to Battlestar Galactica.
Super. Let's book our tickets then.
Sounds great.
Thanks a lot, Bogdan,
Thank you
and
for
then
having
see you
me.
very soon.